Why are the Samaritans the key to unlocking the secret of the year of the rapture? Why are the Samaritans the key to finding out what year the rapture will take place? In Luke 21:32, Christ says, "This generation will not pass before all things are fulfilled." Now, the first set of events in Luke 21, they were fulfilled in 70 AD. That generation, the generation started in the year that Christ was crucified, and a generation later, those events, that set of events, was fulfilled. And then there's another set of events which is going to be fulfilled in the end time. Now, this generation, this end time generation, begins with the return of Israel, and it ends with the second coming. Right before the second coming, there's the tribulation, in which the Antichrist takes over the world by making war against the Christian countries. That's Revelation 13:7. And the war is nuclear war. Russia bombs America, and 200 million souls leave the world, and 2/3 of them are Christian, and so they go to heaven, and that's the rapture. And well, Christ said the rapture would extend from one horizon to the other. That's Matthew 24, 29 through 31. And one horizon to the other, that's like South Korea is on one end of the world, and the United States is on the other end. And so those are the two opposite horizons. And when we get hit by Russia, North Korea will bomb South Korea because they can do it without worrying about America trying to stop them or punish them. And so the rapture will be from one horizon to the other, but it won't be everything in between. Now, like I just said, the end time generation in Luke 21, verse 32, begins with the return of Israel. But the return of Israel in 1948 was not the 12-tribed Israel. Israel made up of 12 tribes. Now, in Ezekiel 37, which is talking about the return of Israel, and Ezekiel 38 is talking about the end time trib. So Ezekiel 37 is the beginning of the end time generation, and Ezekiel 38 is talking about the end time, the finish of that generation. The second coming of Christ is what Ezekiel 38 and 39 are about. Well, Ezekiel 38 and 39 are about Russia invading Israel, but God intervenes, and that's the second coming. Anyway, in Ezekiel 37, it talks about the joining of the two sticks. That's verse 16 through 22. And the joining of the two sticks, it means the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom come together, and they form the 12 tribes Israel. Israel made up of 12 tribes. So that's what has to happen at the beginning of the end time generation. The northern kingdom has to unite. So how can we do that? How can that be accomplished? Well, this is where the Samaritans come into the picture. The Samaritans are the remnant of the northern kingdom. They are the remnant of the 10 northern tribes. And in 1950, right after the return of Israel, the return of Jewish Israel, which is really Judah, the return of Israel in 1948 was not the real return of Israel, because it was only the Jews that returned. Well, you could say that the northern kingdom, the people that fled from the northern kingdom, united with the Jews and mixed with the Jews. Well, sure, when the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians. But let's forget about that. Let's go with the idea the Israel in 1948 is purely the Jews and the Benjaminites. So it's not really Israel. But in 1950, the Supreme Court of Israel and the Knesset, they both decided to accept the Samaritans as real Israelites. Even though their bloodline was diluted, which you can read about in 2 Kings 17 and 18. See, the Samaritans took some of the the Assyrians took some of the Samaritans out and brought them to distant countries, and then they brought the Gentiles from those countries to replace the Samaritans in the northern kingdom. And so the bloodline was diluted. But according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, which is a very well-reputed resource, the article about the Samaritans says that there's some expert says that only 20,000 Samaritans were forced into exile and replaced by the Gentiles from the distant countries that the Assyrians had conquered. Anyway, long story short, if the Samaritans are the remnant of the northern kingdom, and they were reconciled, the nation of Israel took them in and reconciled with them. And so that's the joining of the two sticks. So now Israel, since 1950, Israel is a 12-tribed Israel. Israel today is the real Israel of 12 tribes. And so it meets the requirements of Ezekiel 37, 16 through 22, and also Revelation 7 and 14. Chapter 7 and chapter 14 both speak about 12 tribes, Israel of 12 tribes. So, long story short, the Israel that we need, it has to be 12 tribes. And like I'm trying to say, we have the 12 tribes today. And so you take 1950 as a starting point of the end time generation, not 1948. 1950. And so we add 70 because that's the generation. According to Psalm 90, verse 10. So 1950 plus 70 brings us to 2020. This is the year in which everything will be fulfilled. The rapture will be fulfilled this year. The Russian attack will be fulfilled this year. And the second coming will be fulfilled within 5 months of the Russian attack, and actually that'll spill over into 2021. And I expect the second coming And the execution of the Antichrist will be at Purim. That's the time, that's the celebration of the execution of Haman in the book of Esther. Look at chapter 9, chapter 10. And you'll see that he was a type of the Antichrist. So I'm expecting the real Antichrist to be executed at the time that the precursor of the Antichrist was executed. Just like Christ is the real Lamb of God, he died at the time of the lesser Lamb of God, when the Passover lamb. That was the Lamb of God. The Lamb of that Lamb of God was killed at Passover time, and Christ died at Passover time. And so I'm saying that just like the real Lamb of God died at the time that the lesser Lamb of God died, I'm saying the real Antichrist will die at the same time that the lesser Antichrist died. And I'm going by the idea of parallels. Parallels is very important in understanding Bible prophecy. And so there we have it. I don't want to make this thing too long, because the shorter it is, the more likely people will watch it to the end, and so it'll be more accurate when I count the hits on YouTube. Now, how do we know that Ezekiel 37 is about the 1940s and the return of Israel in the 1940s? Well, it does say that the dry bones would take on flesh, and they would come alive, and they would return to the land that had long been desolate. Now that does fit the Jews returning to Israel in the 1940s, which had been desolate for several hundred years. And what I'm trying to say is, the dry bones are the bones of the Jews that had been killed in the Holocaust, the Nazi Holocaust. And the dry bones that take on flesh, that come alive, but are real skinny, they're rail thin. These are the survivors of the Nazi death camps, extermination camps, that were barely alive at the end of World War II. They went back to Israel, and they fought in the war. And I read in the Encyclopedia Judaica that 20% of the soldiers that fought in the War of Independence in 1948 were actually survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. I'm saying, because the Nazi Holocaust can be pinned down to the 1940s, like say, the Holocaust began in like 1939 when Germany went into Poland, September the 1st. This is September, right now, the first week of September. September the 1st was the anniversary. And but the factoryization of the Holocaust took place in the beginning of 1942, around the same time that America entered the war. We entered the war in December of 41. And anyway, what's my point? We can pinpoint the Holocaust. It was from the beginning of the 40s to 45. And the Jews in Ezekiel 37, they say, our hope is gone. We are cut off. Now that's the way the Jews felt. at the beginning of the Holocaust, before America entered the war. So this chapter is definitely about the Nazi Holocaust. And it says, the Jews would the dry bones would take on flesh, become alive, and go back to the ancient land and become a mighty army. Now that's the King James translation. Now some translations don't have that, don't have the part about a mighty army. But like I just told you, some books, the Encyclopedia Judaica, does say 20% did become part of the army. It was a mighty army. What I'm trying to say when I talk about the dry bones taking on flesh, I'm saying in Ezekiel 37, the bones morph into the walking skeletons that take on flesh. But if we keep them separate, then that fits the Holocaust. The dry bones stay dry bones. They're the bones of the people that died. The walking skeletons that come alive, take on flesh, they're the survivors that almost died. These are two separate groups. Now Ezekiel puts them together, conflates them. If we refrain from conflating them, we have the two groups that we need to fit the Nazi Holocaust. That's all I want to say about that. Okay, I'm going to put a transcript in the description box, a written transcript, so you can make a copy, because the computers are going to go out when EMP takes place, and that takes place when Russia bombs this country. And I forgot to tell you, the reason Russia can get away with this is because we have disarmed. See, that's why Russia made peace. Peace is the big lie. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7 through 12, it talks about the lie, the lying wonders. The Antichrist will tell these lying wonders. Now, that can be translated another way. It can be translated as wonderful lies. Lying wonders, wonderful lies. Now, what are the wonderful lies that Gorbachev told? The wonderful lie was that Russia had changed, was no longer out to get the United States. Russia was becoming democratic. And that's the lie. And it was a wonderful lie. And so you see that Gorbachev's lies, they do fit the picture. And so Gorbachev is the one that told the lies. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of sin tells the lies. The Antichrist. That's another name for the Antichrist. He's also called the son of perdition, the son of destruction. In other words, the destroyer, because he's going to launch nuclear war.